Hello and welcome to the arcade. 2023 was a monumental year for gaming. We got to see the release of some of the most fantastically received games ever, like Baldur's Gate 3 and Tears of the Kingdom. And we also got an unprecedented comeback story with Cyberpunk 2077 Phantom Liberty. There were amazing games like those, and Spider-Man 2 and Alan Wake 2, the Resident Evil 4 remake, and then there were stinkers like the King Kong game and the Gollum game. Overall, I would say 2023 was a fantastic follow-up to 2022. And you might be thinking, it's going to be pretty hard to top 2023. And you'd probably be right. But I do think that 2024 is going to be a big year for gaming, with some surprises along the way. So I figured I'd start off this video by talking about some of the new releases that are upcoming that I am most excited for in 2024.
First up is Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown is a departure from the modern Prince of Persia formula, but actually a return to form of the original game, which was a side-scrolling puzzle platformer with some combat mixed in there too. While The Lost Crown seems to be more action-oriented than the original game, it definitely seems to share more in common with that original release than it does with any of the 3D games in the series. Some of you may know that The Sands of Time is one of my favorite games ever. I replayed and reviewed it last year, and I included it in my video about my top 10 favorite games of all time. So you could say I'm something of a Prince of Persia fan. That doesn't mean I love everything about the franchise or every single game they've put out, but I do love the concept, the characters, the settings, and the music. The first Prince of Persia game I ever played was the original back on my dad's old home PC, but I don't really remember much of it, to be honest. My first real love for Prince of Persia came when I played The Sands of Time at a sleepover at one of my best friend's houses. And since then, I've played the Sands of Time trilogy, the Prince of Persia reboot with Nolan North, and Prince of Persia: The Forgotten Sands. The Forgotten Sands was pretty good from what I remember. It was nowhere near the level of The Sands of Time, but it still felt like Prince of Persia to me. Prince of Persia 2008, on the other hand, well, I don't have much love for this one. It felt nothing like a Prince of Persia game. For me, this game came out of nowhere. It had a completely different art style which I did not enjoy, a new main character which I knew nothing about, and a completely different control scheme. To me, this game felt like they were just trying to profit off of the name of Prince of Persia that they had already built while sharing nothing in common with those original games. Although it was developed by Ubisoft Montreal, and it did review better than The Forgotten Sands, but I just did not vibe with this game at all. I picked it up as a rental from Blockbuster when it first came out, and I think I returned it the exact same day. That being said, maybe I'll give it another chance. With The Lost Crown coming out, my love for Prince of Persia is stirring up again, and I feel like playing through all the games just to see how they all still hold up. And who knows, maybe I'll change my mind about the 2008 remake versus The Forgotten Sands. I know I'm kind of rambling on here, but in my mind back in the day, The Forgotten Sands and Prince of Persia 2008 were like rivals. I just felt like 2008 was coming in and trying to change everything I loved about Prince of Persia, and The Forgotten Sands was there trying to uphold everything that I loved about the franchise while putting on a nice new coat of paint and HD graphics over everything. Enough about that for now. I'm excited about The Lost Crown. Let's move on. The next game is Mario vs. Donkey Kong Remake. Mario vs. Donkey Kong was a game that I was always tempted to buy, but never did because I felt like since it wasn't a mainline entry in either the Mario or DK series that it would kind of be a waste of time. I know that sounds harsh, forgive me, I was a child when I thought this. But now with this remaster or remake or whatever you want to call it coming out on the Switch, I'm very interested in giving this one a try. The spin-off Mario games have always interested me. Not just the sports games or the Mario Karts or Mario Parties, but this kind of game. They all have their place in the massive Mario universe, and I really hope I find a new experience with this game that I never expected. I am hoping for a lot of surprises in 2024, and maybe this will be a good one. Next up is the Star Wars Dark Forces Remaster. Dark Forces was a game that my dad got for me and my brother back in the late 90s or so to play on our old home PC. I was young enough then to be scared of games. Like, not just scared like because it's a scary game, but like scared to die in a game because I thought something bad would happen in real life. That being the case, it took me forever to finish this game without cheat codes. But looking back at this game, it's definitely overshadowed by its sequel, Jedi Knight, which probably is the superior game, but in my opinion, they actually may be too different to compare. Jedi Knight departs from the Doom clone-ishness of Dark Forces, and while that's definitely cool, Dark Forces feels like it has its own distinct style that separates it from that. In Dark Forces, you play as Kyle Katarn, who also returns for the sequel, but in this game there are no force powers or lightsabers. You are simply a mercenary with guns and fists, landmines and thermal detonators who gets hired by the Rebel Alliance to retrieve the Death Star plans. Another Star Wars story about Death Star plans, how original. The game also has some puzzle elements too, like some minimal platforming and some mazes, but the main focus is really the combat and the story. There's a lot of different enemy types that you'll encounter and a lot of different weapons to find. It's a great game, and I know calling it a Doom clone probably does it a disservice, but it's just the easiest way to describe the genre, if you will. And I love Doom, so calling something a Doom clone doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. In fact, if you hear me using that term, it probably means it's good. Anyway, next up is Dragon's Dogma 2. Me and probably a ton of other people never expected a sequel to this game. I always felt like I had discovered an underrated gem when I played the first Dragon's Dogma. I haven't played through it from beginning to end anytime recently, although I did start a new character back in early December. I first played it on my Xbox 360 around the time when it first came out, or rather when it first went on sale, but when I heard that Dragon's Dogma 2 was coming out this year, I wanted to see if I could play through the game again before the second one came out, and this time played on PC just so I could get familiar with the world, the characters, and the controls again before the sequel. The first game is really just an awesome experience with an epic story, great characters, super fun combat mechanics and tight controls, and an expansive and pretty realistic world to explore. I am curious to see if the sequel can live up to the greatness of the original game. And next we have Princess Peach Showtime. This is a weird one for me. On one hand, I do think the game looks super fun, but on the other hand, now that I have a daughter who has started to become more interested in video games, I have more incentive to try games like this that are definitely not aimed at my demographic, but still look great nonetheless. I said earlier that I'm really interested in Mario spin-offs, and this definitely falls under that category for me, while being more of a quote, real game than something like Mario vs. Donkey Kong. I know that sometimes, especially in the Switch era, the Mario spin-offs can feel sort of half-baked. We've gotten multiple releases like that just felt like they were lacking a ton of necessary content. It's mainly been the sports games like Mario Tennis Aces, Mario Strikers Battle League, and Mario Golf Super Rush. And while they all did eventually get their content supplemented post-launch, it's hard to get excited about new Mario spin-offs knowing the track record Nintendo has now given us with the Switch. But that being said, I'm still pretty excited about Princess Peach Showtime because it just seems like a short, fun little game that will have good variety and great presentation. And hopefully I'm right about this one, but if not, hey. Next up is Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2. Space Marine 1 was another game I picked up originally as a Blockbuster rental. I'd only ever played one other game in the Warhammer universe, Dawn of War 2, I think, so I knew this would be a huge departure from that, but I love the idea of a third-person shooter set in the universe of an RTS game. You know, that's something that never got explored fully enough. There were only ever a handful of games that ever tried this. Really just like one that I can think of, but I always wanted a real-time strategy game where you could switch to third person and go boots on the ground and fight right alongside all your troops that you'd been commanding. How can you not love that idea? The only game I ever remember that you could do this in was Rise and Fall Civilizations at War, and sadly that game suffered from both the RTS elements and the third person elements feeling less than fully realized. The game probably would have been better if it had committed to one genre or the other, but I do respect the effort. Because I would love to try more games in this style where you can switch between commanding troops from the strategy perspective to fighting alongside them in a shooter perspective. And there actually is a new game in early access called Silica that is based around this concept, which actually looks phenomenal. And now I have a new game on my backlog. But anyways, I was somehow able to snag Space Marine 1 for my Xbox 360 for only $15 when it launched. I'm not sure how I did that, but I do remember playing through the game in single player and loving it. And the multiplayer was cool, but honestly I felt like all I did was get my butt kicked until I gave up. So yeah, I'm more interested in the new storyline of the sequel and the new set pieces and grand battles they will likely introduce. Really, these games are cool because you get the scope of a strategy game presented in a third-person shooter game. And that's something I really love as well. Games that have massive battles where a lot of it can devolve into complete chaos, and some of it can replicate great battle scenes from famous movies like Troy, The Lord of the Rings, or The Last Samurai. Another one I'm looking forward to is Dewdrop Dynasty. I've been following Goodgis on YouTube for over a year at this point, and every new piece of Dewdrop Dynasty I see, I get more and more excited about it. Check out Goodgis on YouTube. He has a whole series of videos talking about the development of his game, and it is really fascinating. The game is a Metroidvania where you play as a bee who is trapped in the realm of Underland, trying to return home to the hive. The game has an awesome art style and looks like it plays as smooth as butter. There's a demo out now, so you can check it out for yourself. In the game, you'll be able to level up and gain new abilities for combat and traversal, and that coupled with the fantastic presentation makes this one a really exciting game to pick up when it comes to Steam later this year. Next is Little Nightmares 3. And I played the first two Little Nightmares games, but honestly I was caught off guard with this sequel. I guess I shouldn't have been since both the first two games were great successes, but yeah, I am interested to see where they go with this third installment. The first one is my favorite of the two. It has a great atmosphere, a really creepy setting, excellent lighting effects, and really fun puzzles and platforming. And the game manages to be really scary with barely any jump scares at all. Maybe 0 jump scares actually. Next is Moonstone Island. This game technically already released on Steam, but it is getting a console port later this year. And it looks like the perfect game to play on Switch in handheld mode. It has a unique blend of genres, looking like a Stardew Valley meets Pokemon sort of thing, with a beautiful 2D pixel art style that I am heavily digging on. To be honest, I would have bought this game already, but I just preferred to wait until it was on the Switch, which is my main source of gaming these days, at least when it comes to pixel art games like this. They just tend to look amazing in the Switch's handheld mode. And last for new releases, the Silent Hill 2 remake. I love Silent Hill 2, but to be honest, playing through it again last year was sort of tiring. I'll never get tired of the storyline, but I just cannot get used to the tank controls. I've heard and I have hopes that the remake will change up the controls a little bit, which I don't mind feeling helpless and scared and all that, but moving James around like a tank never felt great. I want the controls to be more modernized, and obviously the graphics are getting the full HD remake treatment, and while at first I was concerned about the camera being changed to be over the shoulder, I think that they can pull it off. And we've seen that be pulled off before in Resident Evil 4, switching from the normal stuck camera of Resident Evil games to the over-the-shoulder view. I always wanted to see more of the game and more of the scenery of Silent Hill anyway, so I think this camera change will be a great way of accomplishing that. And with those new releases out of the way, let's talk about the backlog. These are the games that I'm planning to finish in 2024 and most likely review and discuss, so look forward to those future videos. First on my backlog is Bloodborne. Bloodborne. I had so much trouble with this game back in 2020 when my brother lent it to me, but I received my very own copy for Christmas of 2023, and I have already gotten hooked. I do believe that is partially because of the fact that I've now beaten Elden Ring, so I now have a better understanding of what to expect from a FromSoft game. I'm not sure how far into Bloodborne I am right now, but I am having an absolute blast with it. It's similar to my feelings with Elden Ring. It's a game that I think about all the time and just cannot wait to get another chance to play it at the end of the day once the kids are asleep. And you all probably know all about Bloodborne, but it's got an incredible atmosphere, excellent combat and progression systems, and a really interesting and cryptic story, and some absolutely awesome boss fights. I'm loving every second of this game, and I feel like I should finish it relatively soon. And if I don't, it's going to push all these other games way back, so yeah, I should probably focus up and finish this thing. Next on the backlog is Super Mario Bros. Wonder. I also received Super Mario Wonder as a Christmas gift, and from what I've played so far, it has been an absolute joy. I haven't played a new 2D Mario game since the Wii U, unless you count Super Mario Maker 2, so this feels really nice to kind of come back to Mario's roots for a bit. It's also got a lot of the whimsy and charm that I felt like the first new Super Mario Bros. Had back on the DS. I love the fact that you can equip permanent power-ups too. That just felt like a necessary addition to move the 2D Mario games forward. Next is Celeste. I got Celeste on sale last year and it seems really great. I'm only about 2 hours in so far, but the controls are absolutely perfect. This game has been recommended to me so many times, and I think that once I sit down and really focus on it, I will probably love it. I'm looking forward to it. Next up we have The Messenger. The Messenger is a 2D side-scrolling pixel art game in the style of a Castlevania or a Ninja Gaiden, with unlockable upgrades that you can get as well. This game is really cool, although I've been getting my butt kicked somewhere here on the second stage. And that's partially due to the fact that I'm using a new controller, which I'll talk about in a bit, but I really like what this game is doing, and it's one that I'm committing to complete sometime this year so I can write up a full review. Next up is Inscription. I've been into card games since 2014 when I first tried Hearthstone on my brother's request. Hearthstone was a love-hate relationship for me, but overall I think it is a fantastically designed card game. It was just too much to keep up with buying new packs every few months or so. I really enjoyed the single-player expansions that they made much more than just buying new packs, like Naxxramas for example, but yeah, I'm sure the regular pack releases made Blizzard a lot more money than those. And then pretty much by the time the game introduced the wild and standard formats instead of just one ladder, that's when I gave up on trying to stay competitive. But in 2015, my brother finally convinced me to try Magic the Gathering, and that is not a love-hate relationship, but more of an off-again, on-again relationship. I always kept all my cards, all the decks I ever made are still over here at my house, but I do not play this game consistently at all. I do love it when I play it, but it's not quite as accessible as something like Hearthstone. But I think between wanting a good single-player card game and a really accessible card game is where Inscription will fit. It's a single-player story-driven card game that I can play on my PC. So far, it seems to be the best of both worlds. It's got a really creepy atmosphere and an interesting antagonist that drives all the game forward, as well as a small world separate from the card game to explore. I'm really interested to see where the rest of the game goes from here. And last on the backlog is Elix 2. Okay, so I've talked about Elix 2 a few times now, but to tell you the truth, I have not actually beaten the game yet. I'm about 45 hours in or so, and I feel like I'm close to the end. I really stopped playing Elix 2 after I got Elden Ring in January of last year, so yeah, it might end up being hard to get back into, but I'll definitely give it a solid try, especially since I'm so close to the end. I do like the story, and I do want to see where it goes from here. The ending of the first game was great, and while I was excited for Elix 2, it didn't do enough new things as a sequel. I'm hoping the end of Elix 2 will change that pattern and set up a cool new sequel, or at least wrap things up in a really good way. And with the backlog out of the way, we'll talk about my gaming setup and some new additions. This past year for Christmas, my wife bought me this, the 8-Bit Do arcade stick. I am so excited to start gaming with this thing. I've tested it out in Super Mario Wonder on the Switch and with The Messenger on PC, and it seems fantastic so far. I haven't really committed to diving headfirst into this thing just yet, but my goal this year is to get good with this controller. I have always loved arcades, obviously, and I feel like using this will also help me live up to my name here on this channel. So for now, I'm saying a fond farewell to my Switch Pro controller, just for now I swear, and saying hello to the arcade gamer lifestyle. And now obviously not every game is going to work with this thing. It only has one joystick after all. So here's a short list of the games that I intend to play and beat using the arcade stick. Narita Boy, The Messenger, Anodyne, Star Wars Starfighter, Star Wars Racer, Star Wars Rebel Assault 2, Bio Menace, Cosmos Cosmic Adventure, Jill of the Jungle, Super Mario Bros. Wonder, Celeste, Castlevania and Contra Anniversary Collections, Atari 50, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, Cuphead, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. I'll put a limit on myself if these games don't happen to work super well with the controller, but I'm definitely going to give them all a fair shot with this thing.
So that's what I'm looking forward to in 2024. I really hope I can stick to my goals to achieve them and play all these games that I have planned. I'm sure I'll miss some of the new releases. I tend to do that every year. But at least I've got a cool new controller and a bunch of new to me games on my backlog. Let me know what you think. What are you most excited about for 2024? Checking something off your backlog or trying a new release this year? Whatever it is, I would love to hear from you. And as always, thank you so much for watching.